I want to introduce, so shifting gears, I want to introduce my young Jane.
Hello?
Hiya.
Yeah,
Hiya.
hi.
So would you mind introducing yourself and then tell us what you've got today?
Yeah, so I'm a 17-year-old high school student, and I'm really passionate about neurotechnology. I've been involved in it for the last 2 years, been making a whole bunch of projects. Um, so yeah, thanks to NeurotechX, I'm going to be presenting today about the work I've done over the last 2 years, and then leading into what I'm working on right now. So I'll share my screen for the slides.
Okay, I recognize that device.
Yeah, so you guys can see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I got involved with neurotechnology about 2 years ago when I went to this hackathon called Hack the Hammer. So this was my second hackathon. I hadn't really done too many, and they were giving out this hardware called the My Armband. So I realized it's not really EEG, but it is still kind of that biosignal area. So I got really interested in this EMG armband because they told me, oh, it can measure the electrical signals in your arm. And I just found that really interesting because I've never worked with anything like that before. And I was also really interested in video games at the time. So me and my team, we built this video game that you play using this EMG armband. So for those of you who don't know what the armband is, it's the My Armband. It has these sensors. If you look at my arm, it's got these sensors. Each brick is one electrode, and it can measure the electrical signals in your arm, and then it can recognize different gestures. And it also has an accelerometer in it. So what I did is I connected it to this Unity platformer game, and you could play the entire thing just using your arm. So you could use the gyroscope and accelerometer data to move around, and then use different muscle gestures to make the ball jump or reset the calibration. So my team ended up winning a product design award. And the interesting thing was I saw that the first place team walked away with Muse headbands. And that's when I found out about Muse. They said that there were these brainwave sensing headbands, and back then I didn't even know that reading brainwaves was possible. So at my next hackathon, Hack the Valley, I made sure to look for these Muse headbands. An interesting thing about this hackathon was I was in grade 10 at the time, but this was actually a university-only hackathon. So I walked in and there were like 3,000 people there, all university students. So it was kind of intimidating. But yeah, so I still did my best. I found a team of people, and I decided to take the game I actually built at the previous hackathon and just make it even better. So what we did is we combined it with the Muse headband and the Oculus to make this VR BCI game. So it was the same thing as before, platformer game controlled using the EMG armband. But this time we integrated the Muse headband. We used their SDK that integrated with Unity. And first of all, we made the game virtual reality, so it was a lot more immersive. And we had the Muse headband track your brainwaves while you're playing. And it would measure your alpha levels to see how calm you were. And based on that, it would adjust the speed of the music. Now, it's not something very complicated, but at the time I was really excited just because it was my first time using the Muse headband. And we actually ended up winning a Muse headband for our work. An interesting thing was that they gave us one headband, but we were a team of 4. So my team wanted to sell the headband, but I love the Muse now. I wanted to use it and make new brain-controlled apps. So I reached out to Muse, and they actually ended up giving me an extra 3 headbands for me and my team. My team didn't want the headbands, so I ended up with 3 Muse headbands, which is pretty awesome. Since then, I started making more apps. So this is one of the first apps I made using the Muse headband, which is a brain-controlled snake game. You can see my brother playing it. It's controlled using blinks and jaw clenches, which I guess could technically be considered EMG, but I found it really exciting. It was my first time using it, and I've gone a long way since then. actually ended up presenting this project at Sick Kids' conference, their Transforming Pediatric Care conference. So that was lots of fun. The next project I made was actually inspired by the show Breaking Bad. There was a scene where they had a mute man who couldn't speak, and their doctor walked in with this table of letters. And every time she was in the right row where the letter, the way he would speak was that he would spell out words. So this doctor would go through each row, and then he would ring his bell when it was on the right row, and then she would go through that row, and he would ring his bell when it was on the right letter. And I thought, why not do this with the Muse headband? So at another hackathon, actually, I made this brain-controlled keyboard. I was really excited at the time because I thought this was something new, but years later, I've actually seen that a lot of people have built this, but I hadn't heard of anyone building it, so I thought it was original. The next project I made was called Intalam. This is one of my favorite projects. So I got more deep into BCI research. I was looking at how you can measure different stats like focus and attention. And then I decided to combine it with something that was of personal significance to me. So as a student, I love listening to music while I'm studying, but I have some people telling me, oh, you shouldn't be listening to music, it ruins your attention. And others say that it helps your attention. So I made this app that measures your focus while you're listening to music and working. So what it'll do is for each song, it'll give it a focus score, and then it'll curate playlists for you to help you focus. So what I did was I took the data from the Muse headband and split it into the different frequency bands, and then just focused on the beta waves, because based on what I'd read, the beta waves were most associated with focus. So the first thing I would do is get a baseline analysis. So what it would do is that it would measure the baseline focus score for a person, just because everyone's EEG data is very different, and so everyone's apparent focus score would be different. The next thing it would do is sample their focus during different music. So what it would do is it would take music from their own playlist and then go through them and assign each one a focus score and then rank them based on which ones help them focus the most. And the idea behind this was, instead of, there's some apps out there that generate music that helps you focus, but the benefit of this was supposed to be that you could listen to music that you like and also helps you focus. And then, the third step it would just create this playlist for you. So this is kind of what the dashboard looked like. The idea was you can see your focus level live, see different statistics, and then the top songs that help you focus. So after that, I decided to reach out to more people in the brain-computer interface industry. So I just went on LinkedIn and sort of looked around for people, and actually found, that's how I discovered NeurotechX. I met one person in the Toronto community and another person who ran the U of T chapter. So I got involved with them, and I ended up speaking at the Ontario Showcase. So the Ontario Brain Institute hosted this conference, and I got to present Intalam, the app I just talked about. It was a lot of fun. Got to meet a lot more people in the industry. Since then, I started doing more stuff. I presented at more conferences. This is actually a picture of me with the CEO of Muse on the left, and Jillian Ayre. He's a pop artist. I don't know if you guys know the band Major Lazer, but he's one of the people in that band. And this is yet another hackathon, Hack the North, Waterloo's hackathon. This is where I got a lot more better with BCI technology. So I'd taken a break from it for a while, and I went out and learned deep learning and artificial intelligence. And I recreated the algorithm that I used for Intalam and made it even better. So what I did is I collected a whole bunch of focus data on myself, and then trained a deep learning algorithm to identify how focused I was. And I found that this was much more accurate. And at this point, I'd read a lot more papers and found that apparently gamma waves produced a much better result when measuring focus with the Muse headband. So what I did is I collected thousands of data points of me playing chess and various games that require high levels of focus, collected that data, and then just collected data while I was sitting around doing nothing. In this case, I applied it to websites. This application would measure your focus on different websites, so you could see which one was distracting. But the main win here was creating deep learning algorithms to measure focus with EEG technology. This was the dashboard. You can see that, as expected, Facebook and YouTube are producing much lower focus scores versus something like Google Sheets, which is where you tend to be working. So now I'd been really heavily invested in BCI technology, and I thought that it's crazy how the general public isn't really aware of BCIs. And I felt like this is an industry I really want to go into. So I was looking at the current headbands, and I was thinking, like, why aren't consumers using it? And I felt like the two main categories that were important for consumers to use BCI technology were the affordability and comfort. The comfort because people, like, it needs to be, you have to be able to wear, you have to be able to wear it for long periods of time if you're using it for something like the Focus app I was talking about in Talam. And the affordability is important because it's a new technology right now. So people aren't necessarily willing to spend $500 to $1,000 on EEG technology when it's unproven to the general public right now. And so I thought I should create my own headband. And part of this was because I wanted to develop the app I'd made in Talon and actually distribute it to people. But if I used the Muse headband, I found out that, one, they shut down their SDK support. Two, apparently they were taking equity in people's companies if they were using the SDK. So I thought this was a great opportunity for me to learn about BCI hardware and potentially create the first headband that can be used by the general public. So I decided to apply it to sleep tech because I actually thought of this idea about a month before Muse released their Muse S, but I still went through with it because based on what I've seen, there's only two major people in the space right now, which are Dream and Muse S. Dream's great because you can use it all night long. It measures your sleep cycles, but it's much more expensive and it's more for people who have actual sleep disabilities. And the Muse S is something you just wear like in the moments before you sleep, not really all night long. So I went out, started making my own headset. This is me with the first prototype. You can see the electrodes might look a bit weird. That's because they're actually pennies. So I had to go out and look for electrodes, and I found that, you know, these electrodes, they're not reusable. So I need to find good reusable electrodes, but most of them were really expensive and taking a really long time to ship. So I found out that these pennies are actually made of zinc. So I sanded off the bottom of these pennies and just use that and they actually work. So the way I tested it is I plugged it in as an auxiliary electrode into the Muse headband, and it was able to produce pretty good EEG data. Before this, actually, it's a funny story. Oh, sorry. Someone there?
No. Please continue.
Yeah. So before I used these pennies, I was trying to create my own silver electrodes. So my chemistry teacher had a whole bunch of silver powder left over from various experiments she'd done over the years that she gave to me. And I went down to U of T's lab, and I was in the process of trying to find a blowtorch in a facility to melt down that powder and create my own electrodes. But unfortunately, COVID struck around that time, so couldn't go into any public labs or areas to melt them. So ended up making these copper ones, which I'm using for now. But sorry, yeah, I talked about this as silver powder. I reached out to Iden, and they're going to be sending me some of their prototype electrodes, and I think these are actually perfect for what I'm trying to do. So I'm excited to get the BCI hardware ready by the time that I get these new electrodes. So here's actually some of the FFT data, the 4-year data I've gotten from my EEG headband. So right now, it doesn't quite look right. So the way, let me explain how you can see if it's right. So if you look at the 60 hertz area, so the x-axis is the hertz, and then the y-axis is the power. So right now, I haven't put any filtering on the EEG, so there should be a huge spike around 60 because all the electrical noise from the circuitry in our walls, the AC current like that you use for your plugs, that runs at 60 hertz. So there'll be a huge spike there because there's tons of electrical noise from that. So I intentionally didn't filter that out right now, just so I know that the headband is picking up the right data. Right now, I suspect the reason this isn't looking right is because I'm using an Arduino. And the way it works is you get the analog signal from your brain, and then you have to convert it into a digital signal for the computer to process. And the Arduino has a 10-bit analog sensor, which means it can detect like 2 to the power of 10 bits of data. That's a resolution of the data that it measures. So I've gotten another microcontroller that has a 12-bit resolution, and I suspect that'll be better because based on the tutorials I've seen online, they all use the microphone jack, and that has a 16-bit resolution. And that's the only difference I can see between the circuits I'm making and the circuits that they're making. So yeah, this is a lot of fun because I actually had to go online and learn a whole bunch of electrical engineering stuff that I didn't know before. But yeah, it's been a really interesting journey.
Hey, Mayank, do you use a 3-electrode system, or is it just a bipolar system, or do you have a ground as well?
Okay, yeah. So actually, at first I was using a ground, but then I was looking online. I've actually looked through some of the open source schematics. So like I looked at OpenEEG schematics and OpenBCI schematics, and based on what I saw, it looked like they didn't need a ground electrode. So they had the circuitry in place, but it wasn't plugged in because they didn't see any significant improvement in data. So since then, I've changed it I've just unplugged the ground electrode for now, and it doesn't seem to be any worse.
And so you just have a bipolar circuit. You're measuring the voltage across.
Yeah.
And have you looked at the circuitry in the Muse, which is called like a driven right leg circuit?
Yeah, so that's what I had before.
I see, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I had before. So once I get a better resolution on it, I'm going to be trying both. But I'm pretty sure that OpenBCI has a driven right leg in it, but it's not being used based on the schematic I've seen. I may be wrong, but
it's used in a weird way. It's kind of a unintuitive circuit because it's it's kind of I forget the DRL circuit, but maybe someone can bring it up. But it has a weird connection. And the other question I had, it's good to try to measure the line noise as your kind of ground truth. But another really easy thing to do that we did when we were developing hardware is to look for the EKG.
Oh yeah, so that's actually my next slide. Not EKG, but EMG. So,
yeah.
Yeah. So just to make sure, again, just as a prototyping test, I connected these electrodes to my arm, and I was able to get EMG signals. So that way I know it's not picking up just noise, it is able to pick up biosignals.
You can certainly see the low bit rate there.
Yeah. So this is 10 bits, I believe. Yeah, it's 10 bits for the Arduino. And I have another microcontroller that has 12 bits, so that should be a bit better.
But it looks like you only have 3 different values on that signal, and you should have kind of 10 million or something. So why is there such a limited range of possible values?
Oh, and that's been converted into volts.
Yeah, but yeah, I guess I'm still seeing only like 3 different possible values. So I would wonder if it's not only a bit depth problem and it's something else, because you should see a little more resolution. I guess you might be saturating the bit depth on either side of that. So I guess you want to like attenuate your signal because it's outside the range of your A to D converter.
Yeah, I could try amplifying it more, and that might help.
No, the opposite. Turn it down.
Oh, turn it down.
Yeah, put a resistor in the middle. So, because it looks like you might be clipping the peaks and the troughs. Are you doing this live right now? No.
No, this is a GIF.
I thought you were just like very.
No. But yeah, so this is just a test I did to make sure it's working. I'll definitely try that out. I'll try reducing the amplification and see if that helps. But yeah, so just in general, like my goal for this whole project is to bring BCIs to the general public, because this is where I feel BCIs is right now, right? When computers were invented, a lot of researchers had access to them. But like the public couldn't access them because 1, they were expensive. 2, everything was in the command line. The user interfaces just weren't ready for people. And I feel like I wanna bring the home computer of BCIs. like the first BCI that consumers feel is comfortable. They feel that they can go out and wear in public, and it's just really user friendly.
Oh, that was the best Mac.
Exactly. That's my goal for BCIs.
I was feeling
Point to it, say that was the best BCI.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I'm curious, like you mentioned sleep. So, what are the applications do you see when it comes to applying your BCI to sleep?
Yeah, so there's, I actually forgot to mention this. There's this paper where they were able to measure the different sleep cycles using just one channel.
At MIT, you mean like MIT group?
I don't think it was MIT. I think it was from Europe. I don't exactly remember, but they were able to detect different sleep stages with like about 90% accuracy using a single channel. So that's there's the three stages, like level 1, level 2, level 3 sleep, and then REM sleep. So the idea is to be able to measure how your quality of sleep, because that way it makes it like people can start to do biohacking, like, oh, but for certain people maybe eating before they sleep helps them sleep, for others they may not, just because everyone's body is slightly different. And one other idea I had was to create an alarm clock based around this quality of sleep, because what I've experienced is sometimes I can get 4 hours of sleep, but it's a very good 4 hours, and I'll have more energy than sometimes when I sleep 8 hours, just because of quality of sleep. So just a hypothesis I had would be, it would be interesting if you had an alarm clock that woke you up once you get a certain amount of quality of sleep versus quantity.
Yeah, I see. In terms of sleep cycles, though, there are a much more simple way to measure. I mean, even with your like bracelet that they have, or like, so they measure the blood flow with infrared light, and that helps in measuring the sleep cycles. But for some reason, like in these Fit trackers, they don't use the smart alarm function. Like I was wearing Fitbit, and it can show you the statistics of your sleep stages. But for some reason, they just don't want to implement the smart alarm function. And there are like forums with hundreds of messages like for request of this function. But for some reason, it's like, is it like patented or something? They just don't do it.
Yeah.
They're just proxies, though, the actigraphy-based sleep stage measures. And I haven't dug into this in a lot of detail. It's on my to-do list, but you know, like the kind of ground truth. Well, ultimately, the ground truth, like science doesn't fully understand yet, but the benchmark ground truth as far as sleep staging goes is EEG signals, and the actigraphy sleep, you know, the wrist-based actigraphy sleep stage tracking tools. There, you know, how well do we do in reproducing the classifications that you get from polysomnography on concurrently recorded sleep data, right? Sleep EEG. And one thing that I am kind of curious about is how well that works in, you know, highly fragmented and disrupted sleep, because there must be some kind of template, or either explicitly or implicitly, that your kind of actigraphy based sleep staging algorithms are using, that are kind of expecting there to be a certain, you know, set of sequences and a certain trajectory over the course of a night's sleep. So it's kind of like a reservation I have about, you know, well, anyway, that would be what you would get over and above a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or whatever, or a Ring based sleep stage tracking. Is if you're doing it with EEG, then you're like genuinely measuring the brain activity that, as far as we know, is the closest thing we have for like ground truth on sleep stages.
Yeah, definitely. The closer you got to the source, the more accurate it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Did anyone have any other questions?
Have you also thought about like if you are going to use it during the sleep that the person moves during the sleep, so there are a lot of artifacts and so it has to be like you really need to take into account this factor.
Yeah, so I don't think people move around that much, but just because someone's sleeping for a long period of time, you could always just have the software ignore that portion of time when they're moving, right? So you can have an accelerometer in the headband, and if it detects a large amount of movement, it can just ignore that small portion of data. And because they're sleeping for like, what is it, 6 or 7 hours, you'll still have like plenty of data to analyze.
And what's your plan for the form factor? I guess this is always my question.
Yeah, form factor. So I was thinking of making it like a sports headband, so similar to the Muse S, but without a big patch on the front. So my main criteria is I want it to be something that doesn't look like like an EEG headband.
Mhm.
It should just look like a regular headband, and I feel like it's possible.
The patch, you mean the electronics module that
Yeah,
attaches?
electronics module. I still have to look into how to make it washable because I know that will be an issue. But right now, I'm more concerned about learning to make the EEG, and then I can worry a bit more about those specifics of the form factor later.
I think part of their reasoning for making it modular like that was that the soft side could be disposable.
Yeah, I looked into that, and it's actually it's smart because they can their idea was they can take out that module and then plug it into other clothing as well.
Oh yeah, cool.
So yeah, these are all things I do need to look into.
Yeah, cool.
So there's some other things worth checking out in terms of the form factor and the kind of broader usage plan. So I just put 2 links in there, like 2 things that I'm like loosely familiar with. There's this company called Cerebra that have a really clunky device that is, I don't know how much money they're making from it, but it's a product that I believe is getting used I think kind of in the clinical domain quite a lot. So I think it's something like eight wired headbands, eight wired electrodes, and a box, and then the box kind of, it transmits wirelessly to the cloud, to their cloud services, and they have what they do is they provide a sleep quality reports to either to the individuals or to the clinicians or the people who are like running clinical trials. And so the point is, like, in the case of the Cerebra device, they're not doing particularly well on the form factor. I think it's reasonable to say it's nothing special, at least. But they have some other smart stuff that they've maybe focused a little bit more on, which is like the what you do when you get the data, right? So they've done a good job of like packaging the service of getting the data into the cloud, doing their kind of cloud analysis, and then getting a kind of digestible report to the people who want to see it. The other one that I put in the chat there is the Philips one, and the Philips device it's a little bit like an Emotive, I guess, or what was the guys we had on last time from New York?
The Neurosity.
Neurosity, yeah. So the Philips device is a little bit like a Neurosity kind of montage, isn't it? That one's got a little bit more form factor. I don't know so much about the details, but I think they have a similar kind of app-based like report model. So yeah, just kind of reference points there. I think it's useful to think about what you want to do, what you might do with the data, or where it might fit in to the user's kind of activities, and what type of service you think you could. There's more than just the device, right? There's a lot of there's a broader kind of space of like what. And Interaxon are doing something slightly different, right? They have their their app that kind of it's in like the wellness space. It's not in the clinical sleep domain, and it's like those two that I just listed are. So they're doing something slightly different. And I think it's worth kind of just checking out the different variants of what people are doing and having a think about where you might fit in.
Yeah, I think certainly one thing is that is really impressive. Really impressive work. So many hackathons.
Very busy.
Yeah, and have you looked at Dimitri's free EEG32 board? I know it's like a different project, but have you checked out what Dimitri's doing?
I've heard of something called the 32 EEG board. I've looked at so many open source ones, I can't quite remember. That name rings a bell.
Okay. I can put in a link in a minute, just in terms of Dimitri's GitHub. And did you catch Bernard presenting his 3D printed kind of headset material?
No, I didn't.
So that's like a flexible open PCI.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I want to say we've recorded that, Alex. Does that sound right? So we've got at least Bernard's presentation. Okay. I mean, yeah. So I mean, sometimes Dimitri joins us, but I hate to put him on the spot because it's like Moscow time is like, this is not good for Moscow. But he does join us. He and Andre always join the Paris Hack Night, which is, if you're free, you're on the East Coast, like at noon on Monday, you can join Paris and you can talk with Dimitri and Bernard about see their work. Because I think there's a lot to be said for. I mean, it's like, it's so impressive how much you've done, and in all aspects, right? Like you're full stack here. But there's something to be said for like building on top of a lot of circuitry that has been tested out, and like what you'd be able to bring to that. I'm sure would be valuable, and it might solve some of the problems you're having too, right? Or certainly it would be more people that you could be interacting with and learning from. Because I think in particular it's a project that others could build on top.
Yeah. So my main objective with it wasn't necessarily to build the best EEG headband. It was that if anything else, I can just learn about the circuitry, right? So if I go and talk to like Dimitri, I have an understanding of the circuitry and we can speak on the same level.
Yeah, no, I and again, the pennies for electrodes. I mean, I love that.
I mean, it works.
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't surprise us that works, right? I mean, when you consider like what Hans Berger had access to in the 20s, right? It's like, yeah, but still cool to see. Yeah, it's super impressive.